Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Stephanie Hurst and I'm the Member Programs Manager for the National Apartment Association Education Institute. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping points. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the webinars page within the next couple of days on NAA's website. During the discussion, you may type questions into the chat box on your screen and we will share them with our presenter. We have left time at the end for questions. And now I will turn it over to the incoming chair of NAA's DE&I committee, Kara House, to kick off today's presentation. Kara?
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and welcome everyone. We are so excited to be here today for our DEI webinar. To give you a little bit of background for this one, in the fall of 2022, NAA conducted our updated DEI survey, which identifies the changing needs, perceptions, and engagements for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our industry specifically. Today, fresh off the presses, we are going to hear the results of the 2022 NAA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Survey. We're going to take a look at our first steps towards understanding the current perceptions employees hold. And we're so excited for this because this work is going to help frame the work of the NAA DEI committee for 2023. So we're so excited to hear from Jen and learn about, what we got from that survey, how we can move forward as an industry, and understand the differences and perceptions that exist between company leadership and company team members to figure out the best ways to move forward in these initiatives for our work. So to introduce our host, we are hearing today from Jen Picati, Chief Learning Officer for Swift Bunny, who has spent the last 2 decades listening to, learning from, and finding solutions for residential property management executives, employees, and residents. Having joined the property management industry in 2000, her research connects the dots between data, performance, and progress. From NAA's Apartmentalize, National Multi-Housing Council OPTEC, Apartment Internet Marketing Conference, Multifamily Social Media Summit, Canada's Landlord WebCon, and the UKAA Build to Rent Fair, Jen has been a frequent presenter in rental housing. She holds an MS in Quality Assurance from California State University, Dominguez Hills. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much, Kara. This is so exciting to be able to present this information to everyone today. I know that we've had high numbers of people register, not only to participate in the survey, but also to be a part of seeing the results today. So I'm excited to dive in. And it was interesting when I first met with the DEI committee at Apartmentalize in June. I was invited to come and share what the survey is going to look like, how the process was going to take place to conduct the survey. And when I heard that I was going to be meeting with the DEI committee, in my mind, it was going to be, just 12 people going to be sitting around a table, showing some information, answering some questions. And when I walked into the room, it was closer to 100 people. And that's when it hit me. I know how important this topic is, and I know how it impacts so much of how we conduct business, how we're able to recruit and retain employees. But until that moment, I didn't understand the level of stakeholder that we had there. And I think for the first time, I had stage fright in our industry. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people that want to talk about this, but it's exciting and it is gratifying. And it is so important to recognize all of the different voices, not only the people on the committee who were there to make decisions and move things forward and create resources, but also to see the number of people that wanted to be in the room where it happened. And that's what you all are doing. You're here to see what's going on. What are the perceptions that we have? What are the conversations that we can start having that will move us into better action? So that's what we're here for today. So thank you for being curious about the topic and being willing to invest your time and energy into where do we start? Where do we go from here? So let's get into the specifics of what we ended up with. So we rolled out this survey this fall. We invited the industry to participate. We had 33 companies, that includes both property management and supplier partners, participate in the survey. And the survey were actually two surveys. There was one survey specifically for employees, and then we had a second survey that was specifically for executives. So we had 2,709 employees participate from our industry, and we had nearly 150 executives participate. And for those of you who are really geeky about data, the confidence level for this survey was at 99% confidence. We only have a plus or minus 2.2% margin of error. So for those of you who care about this, you're excited to hear that we've got really robust data. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, we've got good data. That's all you need to know about that. You can feel confident in the results to be able to make good decisions on the information. The way the survey is set up, for those of you who aren't familiar with this process, we have a two-dimensional approach that we have developed at Swift Bunny. And what we do is we provide a statement. For example, the company respects individuals' differences. That's the topic. And we ask the respondent to say, how much do you agree with this statement? And then how important is this statement to you? And that gives us the ability to identify what are those, how do we prioritize things, the things that are really important to people that they may not have much agreement with. That shows that we have a gap. And what we're trying to do is to align the importance and the agreement so that things that are really important, we're hoping that people will really agree with that topic. That's when we know we're in alignment, and that's when we know we're performing well. When we have the gap, that's where we find the greatest opportunities. So that's how the survey is set up. And that's how you'll see the results being presented here. We're going to be focusing on a small portion of the survey. The survey itself, the white paper is being published this week, so stay tuned to be able to find out how to download that. But I want to focus on a few things. First of all, the things that scored the highest level of agreement, because when it comes to surveys of any type, it is just as important to understand where you're performing well. What are the things that we have successes in so that we don't screw those up? That's what I'm always telling our clients. These are the things you don't want to mess with. And in fact, you want to build on these strengths and make them even stronger, because those are the things that employees already appreciate about you. That's what they value about being an employee of yours. So you want to maintain and build on those strengths. And then we'll talk about the opportunities. And when we are looking at opportunities in the case of this study, particularly, we're looking at the difference in perceptions between executive leadership and frontline employees. And I love the fact that we had such a strong showing of executives participating, because that lets me know this is an important topic to them. They are invested, they are curious, they're willing to put out their perceptions, to say, okay, here's how I think we're doing, here's how I think things are going. And they're interested to see, how is that similar to or different than what our employees are experiencing? And that creates a great starting point where we can put a name on certain things. And we can name, what are the things that are going well or have a solid foundation that we can keep working on? What are the areas where we're out of sync, and why is that? And we can start having valuable conversations about those things to be able to create action for positive change. So let's dive into the key findings. And I want to start with those things that have the highest level of agreement. What are the things that we have a solid foundation to build on? And the first one is the company respects individuals' differences. And I'm going to kind of go an orientation here for you so you know what we're looking at. So the blue represents how the employees responded. The green represents how the executives responded. And you can see over on the left-hand side, this is the level of agreement on a scale of 1 to 5. And then on the right-hand side, this is the level of importance on a scale of 1 to 5. So you can see for this particular topic has a high level of importance, 4.55 for employees, 4.68 for executives. And you can see the level of agreement is also above, well above a 4.0. So employees are a 4.24 on a scale of 1 to 5, and executives were 4.58. This is a solid foundation. Anytime we're seeing agreement levels above 4.0, this lets us know that there are a lot of good things in place, a lot of good things are happening, and that is a solid foundation to build on. Now, what was great about this particular study is that we really also dove into a lot of demographic information. And the demographic section of the survey was not required. It was purely voluntary, but it gave us a good understanding of what all we were, who all was participating, who all was invested in the study. And the demographics that we looked at were not only age, education levels, race and ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, and the number of children. So we were able to look at this data in a variety of different ways to see how are different groups of people experiencing this particular topic. What is the level of similarity and what is the level of difference? And so in this particular one, we've got a very solid foundation, a strong foundation to build on. But when I started looking at the actual demographics to see, are any particular groups experiencing this widely differently than other groups? What I found was when we looked at race and ethnicity, our Black or African American employees were experiencing this markedly differently from the other employees. So the dark blue shows the level of agreement for each group. And you can see this one is different than the other ones. We also see that those who reported that they are of 2 or more races or ethnicities, theirs was even lower. So this is all to say, this is where we're able to look and see where are the similarities, where are the differences in perception. This is where we can start having really valuable conversations about why is that? What is it that we need to do to make sure everyone is experiencing this in the same way? Now, another one where we had an area of relative strength, and this is something that we've seen not only in our diversity, equity, and inclusion survey, but for those of you who are familiar with the mental and emotional health survey that we conducted with NAA over the past year, this was an area of strength there as well, consistently across surveys, and even our employee engagement surveys conducted by Swift Bunny, we see that the supervisors creating an inclusive work environment, this is a continuous and consistent strength in our industry. We have really, really good supervisors. Now, there's always going to be exceptions to the rules, right? But by and large, we have really strong supervisors in our industry. We know that this is a level of importance for both employees and executive leadership. Now, the executives on their survey, the wording of this topic was just slightly different. We asked them to evaluate our supervisors as a whole within our organization. Our supervisors create an inclusive work environment compared to employees who are asked, my supervisor creates an inclusive work environment. So just a slightly different take on the same sentiment. But you can see overall agreement. Executives said really strong 4.40 and 4.27 for employees. Now, this was another one where we look at, we've got a solid foundation. We want to continue to build on it. We've got variety of data from a variety of different surveys that tell us that this is consistently a strength within our industry. When we dive into the details, again, I looked at among the race and ethnicity, slightly different experience. And we see that the experience 3.87, and we just look across the level of agreement, we see that that's different. We also see that for Native Americans, it's a little bit different as well. So just being aware of these differences in perception, these differences in experience, we continue to build on the strength, but also being aware that not every single employee is experiencing this the same way. And how do we change that? How do we improve that? All right, so we have some basic foundations. These are things that, by and large, are strengths, they're solid foundations. We need to continue to build on them. There is room to grow, but it's good to know where our strengths are so that we can continue to bulk those up. I want to shift gears a little bit and look at the differing perceptions. So when we're looking at employee survey results and executive survey results, again, we want to see, and I love the fact that so many executives were willing to put their perceptions out there and say, okay, here's what we're seeing, here's what I think is going on, and being curious and interested in what are the similarities, what are the differences, and based on those, how do we either build on what's going well, or how do we start having conversations and take action on some of those things that might be out of sync with each other. So the first thing that we want to take a look at is this one. I love the fact that NAA was very clear in their stance of saying we need to address the needs of working parents and caregivers. We need to give them a voice because we know this is such a large part of our industry of working parents and caregivers. And what is their perception and experience within the workplace? So the topic is the company accommodates the needs of working parents and caregivers. You can see this is similar importance for both employees and executives. And the agreement level, you can see here, is similar, but a little bit of a gap in between those perceptions. So when we look at the breakdown, again, I was looking within the demographics to see, are there any particular groups within all of the different demographic types? Were there any that were standing out? And I'm going to try and see if I can get this little tab to go down so I can see the bottom of my screen. There we go. So we see for race and ethnicity, Black and African American employees experience this differently, 3.64 on a scale of 1 to 5. We also saw that Native Americans were below a 4.0, and those who are 2 or more races and ethnicities below a 4.0 as well. So looking at the needs of working parents. We also saw that when it comes to gender identity, females were above or below a 4.0, as were our transgender employees. So this is something to take a look at. What are the employees that are most impacted, most affected, that are having a different experience than other employees? And again, starting a conversation of how do we address this? How do we define it? How do we address it? What are the things that we can do to ensure that all of our employees have the best opportunity possible? Now, there were a lot of comments within the survey, and I read every single comment from the survey, and they were very interesting. There were so many comments of the wonderful things that companies were doing, that leaders were providing, important conversations that had been happening, but there were also things where people were expressing their frustrations or their questions or their challenges. And I think this was a really good example of a lot of the comments that I saw about parents and caregivers. This person said, parents and caregivers are consistently having to choose between being able to complete the daily tasks or projects and being able to support or meet the needs of their children. It seems like the higher up in the company, the more flexibility you have for those items. And I thought that that was a really valuable piece of information to pull out. Because I experienced this too when I worked on the property management side of our business, is that there seemed to be a little more flexibility in the corporate office than on site for those who were caregivers. And we saw the sentiment come up over and over again in the survey. So as a leader, taking a look at the industry results, if your company participated and got 10 or more responses, you got your own individual, or you will get your own individual results, being able to take a look at that and say, okay, what is the experience of our parents and caregivers within our organization? And what are the things that we do have in place to help support them so that they can do their best work when they're at work? Can they do their best work, or are there things in place that cause difficulty and challenges and stress for those who are parents or caregivers? Because it's not only parents these days, right? We have a lot of people who are caring for aging parents or for adult children who have different needs, health needs. So we have to be aware of all of those things. All right, the next topic that we have a great opportunity for is job opportunities are promoted to all employees. Now, this is something that I see in my research every single day in working with clients across the industry. This is a topic that's often on our employee engagement surveys. And there is a perception of oftentimes employees saying, I don't know how to progress in my career development. And yet we know this is one of the most important things for any employee. They want to be able to progress in their career or grow or develop in their role, but they don't necessarily know how to do it. And we saw that echoed in the diversity, equity, and inclusion survey. So as far as importance goes, nearly identical, whether it was employees or executives, but you could see there's definitely a gap in agreement here between employees and executives. So when we look at this, I love this chart, so you're going to have to indulge me because I think this is so fascinating. This is the breakdown of results. And this is where on a scale of 1 to 5, you can see how each group responded. So what we're seeing here, 5, the score of a 5 represents totally agree or important. A score of a 1 was totally disagree or unimportant. And the light blue, this is the importance column. The dark blue is the agreement column. So when we compare employees to agreements on this distribution of responses, we can see that executive level of response to this topic of job opportunities promoted to all employees is significantly higher. 58% say that they totally agree versus 45% of employees who say they totally agree. And you can see on the left side of the scale, 8 and 7% saying they disagree or totally disagree. That's 15% of our employees saying that they disagree or totally disagree. So this is an important thing to be able to take a look at and see there's a difference in perception, and it's an important thing to address, because oftentimes what we see is that leaders in their minds, they're saying, okay, well, we've got a career page, we have annual performance reviews where we talk about future, but just because they might be in place, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's meeting the expectation that employees have. So things to think about: if you have a weekly or monthly email that's going out to your employees saying, hey, do you know anyone who would be interested in these roles? Because we're trying to find new places to pull new employees from, right? So we've got referral programs and all those things. The one subtle change that you can make that makes a huge difference is when you send out those emails. First of all, if you're not sending them out, consider starting that, but reach out and say, are you or anyone you know interested in any of these open positions? The reason that distinction is so important is that employees want to know that the company is interested in their development. They're interested in the value that they bring to the table. And what's happening right now in our industry, and has been for a while now, is that the reality is we need every single employee that we have in exactly the role that they're in right now. And so to even ask what someone might be interested in, or to display every opening that we have, a lot of supervisors are nervous about that because they can't personally afford to lose that person even to another position in the company. And yet the reality is, if we're not having these conversations with our employees saying, what are you interested in? How do you want to grow? What development opportunities can we provide for you? Is there a role in the company that you aspire to? If we're not having those conversations within our organization, the thing is, they're not just going to stay there and hunker down. If they see that opportunity somewhere else, they will go. We'll lose them either way. So I would rather invest in our employees, talk about their aspirations, show them what opportunities there are. Because the thing is, even if you promote these opportunities to everyone, here are the openings within our organization, doesn't guarantee there's going to be an internal promotion. But what it might do is find out, oh, wow, we've got some very interested people in here. How can we start developing them and preparing them for a next role or an expanded role? And really developing what we always talk about, which is our bench strength. And that really lets the employee know we're investing in you. And those are things that cause employees to stick around. If they see that they're being invested in, they want to invest right back. What's also interesting is looking at the geography of what can be different. For example, so the dark blue is agreement, the light blue is important. So in the Northeast, look at this, the agreement level is only 3.46. That's almost a full point below the level of importance. And also in the Southeast, we see some big differences as well. So even geography, it's interesting how different parts of the country are faring better or worse in the perception of job opportunities being promoted to all employees. So this was a very representative of many comments that we saw. There were some recent organizational changes with people being handpicked for positions as opposed to those positions being advertised or posted on the company intranet. So again, people are really interested in what's available, what opportunities could there be within this organization for me to grow and develop. We need to be talking about them on a regular basis. And the thing is, our supervisors need the training on how to have those conversations, because a lot of times we put people in managerial or supervisory positions. They don't necessarily have all the tools or all the skills. They've been there for a long time. They know the job of either the department or the site really well. But as far as being an actual leader and manager, they might not necessarily have that skill set. So these are some of the things that leaders need training on, of how to have those conversations about development. All right, another topic that we have here is the company values the expression of differing points of view without fear of negative consequences. Now, remember, when we talked about the highest level of agreement, one of the areas of relative strength was the company values employees' differences. So the differences of just people, the perception was, yeah, the company values that. But when it comes to valuing the expression of differing points of view, that's a different story. And so we see that the importance level are pretty high. In fact, executives value that and assign a higher level of importance than even the employees. But when it comes to the level of agreement, you can see there's quite a difference here between employees and executives. And here's where it gets really interesting for me when we see this distribution, the distribution of responses. What I see here, the executives very, totally agree, 58%, an additional 28% agree. We only have 42% of employees saying that they totally agree, an additional 26%. But here's where it's really interesting. 19% on a scale of 1 to 5, they gave an answer of 3. That's a neutral response. That means they're either unsure or unwilling to share what they think about this particular topic. The topic is the company values the expression of differing points of view without fear of negative consequence. If I am unsure or unwilling to answer, I think that tells me all I need to know, that there is a level of hesitation. There is hesitation in expressing a differing point of view. And then we've got 13% more who say they disagree or totally disagree with this topic. So we know that executives value the importance, they consider this a very important topic, but when it comes to actually living it out and the experience of the employees, we've got nearly over a third of our employees on this side of the scale saying not necessarily comfortable with giving a differing point of view. Now, I have a favorite author, Adam Grant. He is an author. He is an organizational psychologist. He is a professor at the Wharton School of Business. And he has this book called Think Again. He's written a lot of books, but this is my current favorite of his, where it really talks about this topic is about being, how do we present our point of view? How do we allow for conversation? How do we create a safe space for people to express their opinion, express their different points of view without it being combative, without it being adversarial? And a lot of what he brings to the table is suggesting being truly curious. If I am really curious about why you feel this way, why that's important to you, I'm curious about your experience with this, and I listen, and with true openness and curiosity, I want to understand where you're coming from. What tends to happen is not only do I start to have a different level of respect of, oh, I didn't understand that about you, or I didn't realize that was why you have such a strong feeling about this. But what it also does is you may be more interested in or more curious about why I have the point of view that I have. The other thing that we need to understand is that it's not a me versus you. There's a whole spectrum of experiences and points of view, and all of this creates a rich conversation that we can have. Now, are we always going to agree? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're all going to come to the same point of agreement. But what it does allow us to do is say, okay, at least I understand where you're coming from. If we all come with a sense of curiosity, we can start having these conversations that are productive. And maybe we can move forward a little more quickly with a little more buy-in, where even if I don't agree 100%, now at least I understand and I'm willing to concede, or I'm willing to participate because I know how important this is to you. So Think Again by Adam Grant, great book. I would say go and get it for all of your staff. It's especially your managers, because it's so important. But this was a representative comment that one person made. Concerns expressed are immediately dismissed and put aside. Management staff needs support with identifying what inclusion means when supervising others. I think this is such a strong statement, because again, not every manager, not every team member knows how to have certain kinds of conversations. My 14-year-old daughter, she was a counselor in training at a summer camp this summer. And some of the training that they were provided with leading up to camp, it was about difficult conversations. If you have two little 10-year-olds and they are debating the merits of Trump versus Biden, they were given words and phrases of how to come into that conversation, how to kind of diffuse heated feelings, how to maybe redirect the conversation into something more constructive. But they were given all these tools and words and phrases of how to come into a challenging, charged conversation and kind of neutralize it a little bit. And I thought, wow, first of all, how scary that 14-year-olds have to be trained in this way for summer camp, but also how incredibly valuable. These are things I would love to have had tools for when I was that age, of just how to manage and navigate difficult conversations, or between friends that were having a heated argument, or whatever it might be. We need those words and phrases. We need that training, management staff in particular, because it really does help navigate a variety of situations that they'll be thrown into. All right, here is one of those probably one of the hardest hitting topics that really is the heart of the matter, the heart of our perceptions within our industry. Employees are treated equitably. So we see how important this is. We see this on the right side of the scale. Executives 4.77, employees 4.64. This is really, really highly important without question. And then we look at the level of agreement, and we see there is a gap of 0.5 point. That's a significant gap in perception and experience. Now, what I want to make very clear is that we're not talking about right and wrong, that the executives are wrong and the employees are right. What we're talking about is perception and experience. And this is where we can put a name on, here's what we're experiencing. And we can look at this and see, okay, different people are experiencing and perceiving this differently. Now we can have a conversation that can be productive. We can start asking more questions. We can start looking at things from a slightly different lens and be more sensitive to different situations. And I think that is the true value of this whole process, of this whole survey, of showing us, where are we today? Where do we want to be? And how do we get there? This helps provide the starting point of, and for some people, it's not the starting point. You're continuing on this journey, but it gives us some really good landmarks to observe and see, so that we can say, where do we go from here? Again, when we look at the distribution of responses, it is very different from executives and employees. 63% of executives totally agree, and an additional 25% agree. Now, again, this is their experience and their perception. They may know the different processes, programs, things, decisions that have been made. So from where they're sitting, there might be a lot of really great things going on and a lot of great support systems put in place. But now they have the opportunity to take a look and see, okay, our employees may be experiencing this differently than we thought. They might not be seeing the whole picture. They may not be getting the whole message. It might not be rolled out or operating the way we thought it was. That's okay. This value is looking at this and seeing this is the case. We have 44% of our employees saying that they totally agree. There's a lot of great stuff going on. Okay, let's not make any bones about that. There are some good things going on. Additional 24% say they agree, but we've got 18% in that neutral zone, either unsure or unwilling to say one way or the other. But then we go over here and we have 7% who disagree and additional 7% who totally disagree. So we have a different distribution of experiences throughout our organizations. We can name it, we can see it, and now we can start having valuable conversations of, okay, so if this is the case, then what can we do? Let's find out more about this. Why is this perceived this way? Why is this experienced this way? And then what can we do as a result? What actions can we take? When we look at different groups that may be impacted differently, we can see Black African American, 3.58. Very different experience when we look across the dark blue. We see Native Americans, 3.91. 2 or more races or ethnicities, 3.83. Okay, and we look at gender identity, females, 3.93. They're below that 4.0 mark. So different experiences. And I think it's so valuable for everyone to take a look at this and say, okay, this is important to know. Let's find out more. Let's have conversations. Let's figure out what are the right actions to take that are going to help everyone feel that they are being treated equitably. We also have to understand that, again, it's not one side versus another. There are a variety of experiences and opinions and perceptions that are a part of this conversation. And I thought it was important to bring up this particular comment because there wasn't only one like this. There were many people, and I appreciate the fact that they were willing to participate in the survey and voice their feelings about it, because everyone's feelings, this is how they feel. We're not going to tell them you don't feel that way. You don't really feel that way. This is how people feel. And we have to understand all of the different voices that are a part of this very critical and important conversation. But this person said, I completely disagree with this, quote, inclusion survey because it speaks to creating special or additional actions based on protected classes. We are all people. Please stop trying to divide us by creating inequities. This is one voice. There were multiple voices having similar sentiments. This is part of the conversation too. So how do we, again, this is where it's important to be able to have these very valuable conversations internally and recognize there are a lot of different points of view. And how do we be curious about why everyone feels the way they do, invite that conversation, and find ways to move forward. Now, this is a big one. And especially in today's economy, this is top of mind for everyone. The company is working to improve equity in pay. Now, let me just tell you from an industry perspective, and this is probably the same for every industry, but particularly in multifamily, when it comes to compensation, compensation is the number one concern for employees within our industry. When we do any employee engagement survey, that always rises to the top as the biggest concern. And so this was no surprise to me when I saw the topic of equity in pay, when we look at it from a different perspective, more than just a compensation package. Are you paid fairly, but equity in pay. So we know this is very important. We can see this for both executives and employees. But when we look at level of agreement, there is a definite difference in perception from employees and executives. We see that executives are seeing this at a 4.11, above a 4.0. And we see employees at 3.51. That is a significant gap in perception. And when we look at the distribution, you can see it. You can see totally agrees only at 29% for employees. An additional 23% are in agree. But then we've got 28% who are neutral. They don't know. They don't know. And then an additional 20% who are either disagree or totally disagree. This is an important thing to take a look at, because if we've got nearly a third of our employees saying, I don't know if they are or not. A big part of this topic is how are organizations, how are leaders communicating what is happening regarding equity in pay? I know that it was interesting. I actually read an article this weekend, and Gardner, they're a research company, they did a study this summer in July, and they found that 8 out of 10 organizations across the United States, all industries, 8 out of 10 do an annual equity in pay audit, which was surprising. That was a lot higher than I expected. And so that was a big eye-opening thing for me. It's like, oh, I didn't realize so many companies are doing this on an annual basis, a pay equity audit on an annual basis. But we're also seeing legislation, Colorado, for example, when you post a job, you have to post the salary range. There's transparency there. So I think our society within the United States is working towards more transparency in pay. And I think there's a lot of opportunities within our organizations to have transparency for this is what this job pays, regardless of who you are. Maybe it's based on experience, et cetera. But that's another thing that we're contending with right now. We are so short-staffed, especially in maintenance, for example. I can't tell you how many stories I hear about, oh my gosh, they just hired on these new maintenance people. They've never done maintenance before. They've got to be trained. We've got to do all this stuff, but they came in at the same or more pay point than our long-term, really seasoned, really experienced maintenance people. And so that's factoring as well. So this is a topic that in today's economy, more so than what we've had in recent years, is fraught with peril. There is a lot of stuff going on, but transparency can go a long way in helping people at least know, okay, at least know that everyone who's in this job, this role, in this state or this market, we're within this range. That's a really good starting point. And we know when it comes to gender identity, females in particular are feeling like, okay, I don't feel that I'm being paid at the same rate as some of my male counterparts. And we're seeing non-binary, non-conforming feeling that differently as well. And I think this sums it up. Pay is still too secretive, so equity is not able to be reached by employees. I think this is a great starting point for just looking, how transparent are we about pay ranges? That is a good first step. And this is another one where we can start having conversations and finding out from your employees, when we talk about pay equity, what does that mean to you? What are the things that you think about? What's the context around that? And that can be really revealing. So when it comes down to where do we start? What's the top opportunity? Because sometimes we look at data, and this is only a part of the survey that we're talking about today. The white paper will have all of the data. It's over 70 pages. There's a lot of data in this white paper. But it can be overwhelming because we want to fix everything all at once, and that's not possible. We need to figure out what is our one starting point. And what I would recommend is this topic. And this topic is, I am confident executive leadership is taking action to address diversity, equity, and inclusion within the company. The executives had a slightly different version of this, this topic, which is, I am confident I am taking action to address diversity, equity, and inclusion within the company. So you can see the importance level, very high for both executives and employees. And you can see they're both above a 4.0, which is a good starting point, but you can see there still is a bit of a gap. But the reason I say that this is so important, and this is based on such great research, Doug Miller, he was the one who was the project manager for this whole survey. He did the initial analysis, he did correlation analyses for all of the topics. And it was so clear that executive leadership really being visible, really laying out a vision, it directly impacts so many other perceptions that employees have. It affects really strongly. There's a strong relationship to how people feel about if the company is committed to DEI. There's a huge relationship of the perception of our employees treated equitably. It has a huge impact on people's perception of the company having an effective policy or monitoring program or grievance process for DEI topics. I cannot overstate enough how important it is that executive leadership is vocal and visible on this topic and really saying, this is what we're all about. These are the expectations. Here are the actions that we're putting into place. This is our culture. Executive leadership can't leave this to HR. HR can only do so much. You can't leave it. You can't form a DEI committee and say, okay, you know, we're good. Executive leadership has to be consistently and constantly a part of the conversation, a part of initiatives, and a part of the communication of what we're doing and what's going on. Now, I also have to say, while we found some really meaty opportunities for our industry, we also heard so many amazing things that are happening, things that employees are so appreciative of and that really they were excited about to see going on in their organizations. They had a lot of pride in what they were seeing in place. And so this is one example that I thought was just so great, because we asked, what are some things that your organization is doing that have been really successful regarding DE&I? And this person said, number one, they created an official DE&I committee headed by a specific executive in their organization. They've increased the presence of females in leadership roles, and they've provided equal opportunities for people of all ages, including those later in their careers. And this is just one of so many great examples of what's currently going on in our industry. There is a light on this topic. There is a lot of engagement, a lot of conversation, a lot of action that is being put into place. And like I said at the beginning, I am so happy to see so many people be curious, genuinely interested, genuinely engaged in this topic, because they know that by ensuring that every employee feels seen, feels valued, feels supported, that not only is better just for all of us as people, it's good for business. It makes sure that we have what we need to be productive, to do our best work, to have positive relationships within our organizations, which means we're going to lower employee turnover, which can lower resident turnover. And so all of that is really, really good for the bottom line. So the question that we all have is, where do we go from here? And I know that there are some great things, some great resources that NAA already has in place. They're already talking about. You heard Kara say that this study is really going to inform a lot of the things that the DEI committee is going to be focusing on in 2023. So you're going to be hearing more from her committee in the coming months, which we're excited about. But also there are existing resources. I know that Stephanie was going to post a link in the chat on resources that NAA currently has on their DEI resource page that you should really explore. There's a lot of great stuff there. So I think now we're at a point where we should be talking about Q&A.
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much, Jen. This was absolutely amazing and great information. And I'm personally just so grateful for the level of detail that you went into in some of these results, you know, just sharing how we can read some of the correlations between the information that we're getting and seeing some of the differences that exist in the perceptions that are happening within our own companies. So that's really important. One question that came in early in your presentation was there were categories that were listed as other. I think in terms of both racial identities and gender identity. So the question was just what goes into other?
Well, that was actually an option within demographics. If someone who was choosing to answer the question, the demographic question, if they did not feel that any of those descriptors applied to them, they had the option of other. And so it could have been any reason, or they could have left it blank, but that was an option that they could specifically choose if none of the other topics if they felt that it didn't apply to them, that they were something other than what was listed there. They also had the option to select, I prefer not to answer. So that was another category as well.
Somebody earlier asked if we will receive a recorded copy of this webinar, and I just want to read out to everyone that yes, we'll be posting the recording on NAA's website within the next couple of days. So if you're on here now, you're getting the information now. If you know somebody who wants this information but had to miss it, just make sure they know that they can find it on the site coming up here soon. Let me see. There was another question of this person said, this is very helpful information about the perceptions within our industry. Is there any data regarding actual pay equity by gender or the racial composition of our industry?
You know, we don't have a specific breakdown. And so that's something that I don't know if NAA has available, if they have pay broken down by different demographics. Maybe that's something that that will be able to be sent out at a later date if there is something available. But as far as I know that we don't have any of that, any data that's specific to that. But it's a good question. It's something that we definitely need to be taking a look at as an industry.
Geo asked, I was wondering if you suggest getting individuals certified in DEI for each company, and if so, do you have any recommendations or suggestions for who to go through?
That is a great question. And within the white paper, we actually asked the executives how many of them have done things like certification and things like that. And there's a good percentage who have either started that process or are planning on doing that in the new year. I don't know personally of the best DEI certification, but I know this is something that that NAA does have some resources about. Stephanie, do you want to address this particular program?
Yes, so this is a new program that we've recently launched on our online learning system, Visto. It's got a variety of courses that you can take to get a certificate from this program. Here, let me drop the link into the chat. And you can check this out for more information here.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm. And I can just share from a personal level, I have taken this course and you guys, it had dropped some real truth bombs. There's some really, really great information in there and really helpful perspectives about, you know, everything from industry history to the perceptions that exist within our specific industry. So it's a really helpful course to take. I definitely enjoyed it. We have another question. What recommendations do you all have for either DEI councils or affinity groups and ERGs at companies to help provide the most impactful feedback to senior leadership?
You know, that is such a good question. And I think it's something that's evolving within within our industry. I would say, you know, look to the NAA DEI committee. They've got so many great resources, so many good suggestions, so many seasoned experts who are doing it and have done it within their organizations. So, Kara, what would be the best way for people to learn more about different models or different case studies that have worked well?
Yeah, I'd say definitely check out the NAA DEI resource page. There are a ton of great resources, links to webinars and articles and several other things that would be helpful with that. Reach out to our NAA staff advisor, Sarah, who can get you in touch with members of the committee to ask direct questions or more specific questions. I know in the Clubhouse page that right now really is focused in on the members of the committee, but I think plans are to share out resources in a broader way. One of the ideas that came out of actually the NAA DLP program, and I believe I saw Miss Crystal Dukes on this call, had just a phenomenal idea of putting together different resources, including a list of industry speakers, mentors, just people within the industry who work in this area already, who can be invaluable resources to the programs that our companies are starting to develop. And having something like that is a really great tool to be able to know directly who to reach out to, so that you're not just reaching out to the person whose name you see all the time. It's a great way to find other resources within our industry who can start answering some of those questions.
Love it. I saw one question about, are there other books you would recommend for the topic outside of the previously mentioned Think Again? One book that I am working my way through that I'm really, some great light bulb moments and some great words and phrases to help integrate into my own vocabulary. It's a book called Wayfarers or Waymakers. And it's really focused on, Waymakers. It's focused on how, while executive leadership is so key to leading these initiatives and really creating the culture in an organization, the way people truly do progress and get invited to seats at the table and get opportunities presented is when someone opens that door, makes that introduction, brings them into a conversation. And so each one of us is a way maker. If we choose to be, and if we have that on our radar. And so I think that's a really important thing for all of us to also embrace, that it's not like someone else needs to do something about this, but we each are doing something about it every single day in every interaction and every conversation. And when we have the opportunity to make an introduction or open a door, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's open the door, make the way for everyone. And that's how we elevate, rising tides raise all the boats. Let's raise all the boats, everybody.
I am not seeing any other questions right now. So Stephanie, I can turn it back over to you.
Yep, that sounds good. Well, thank you all so much for your time today and being with us and sharing this incredible information. I have one final update before we close today. We are currently calling for applications for the 2023 Excellence Awards and 20 in their 20s. The deadline to apply for both opportunities is next Friday, December 16th. We want to recognize you and celebrate you at Apartmentalize. So please submit your applications before the deadline. You can check out this link that I just put into the chat for more information on these programs. Again, we will be posting the webinar recording as well as the white paper on NAA's website within the next couple of days. So please be on the lookout for that. And with that, thank you for joining us. We wish you all a safe and happy holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you in 2023. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.